It's 7 hours GMT, 10 a.m. in the Gaza Strip, where a new day has come with a ceasefire and fresh hopes for an extended break in fighting between Israelis and Palestinians. This is the Gaza skyline. We're going to show you the most recent pictures. It's a very different scene from the last 11 days, where the telltale signs of bombardment were often seen above the city. Well, that ceasefire between Israel and Hamas came into effect overnight. It's hoped it can end almost 2 weeks of a conflict during which Gaza was pounded by Israeli airstrikes and thousands of rockets were fired towards Israel. At least 233 Palestinians died, 65 of them were children, and 12 people were killed in Israel. This is how news of the ceasefire was received. Celebrations broke out in Gaza, Bethlehem, Ramallah, and in the occupied East Jerusalem neighborhood, which has been at the center of the most recent tensions. Families in Gaza who'd been sheltering at UN-run schools have started returning to their homes after the ceasefire announcement. Many fled to the schools on the outskirts of Gaza City. The UN says nearly 60,000 people have been displaced. Our correspondent, Yumna Al-Sayed, joins us live from Gaza. Yumna, we can see the rubble there behind you, and once the happiness at this news begins to filter through, the rebuilding operation is going to cost hundreds of millions of dollars, surely.
Yes, Peter. I mean, this is another neighborhood where I am now in Beit Hanun, and the neighborhood has been massively destructed. So many civilian homes here have been destructed, and not only that, I mean, infrastructure also has been badly destructed here. The water pipes and electricity lines. So basically, the people or the residents of this entire neighborhood, Beit Hanun, most of the neighborhood, they do not have any water or electricity now, which means that to reconstruct all the infrastructure, the roads and the buildings, great amounts of funding needs to be put in these areas and neighborhoods so that the residents can relive in them again. Now, the problem is these people have moved back to their homes because of lack of all humanitarian aid and services at UNRWA schools, but are now lacking the basic essentials of life in their homes.
OK, Yumna, thanks very much. Yumna Al-Sayed reporting live for us there out of Gaza. Harry Fawcett joins us live as well from West Jerusalem. So, Harry, the narrative, both sides claiming a victory here, is being built hour on hour.
That's right, yes. I mean, the Israelis, to start with, are saying that the civilian restrictions that have been in place, especially the ones very close to Gaza, are now being lifted, apart from schools. They're saying the military emplacements will stay there for several days, monitoring the ceasefire. And yes, as you say, both the Israelis and the leadership of Hamas are claiming victory. Hamas is saying that it exacted concessions out of Israel, both in terms of Israeli activities in Sheikh Jarrah and on the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound, known as the Temple Mount, to Jews. The Israelis are entirely denying that, saying it is a lie. The Israeli line is that Hamas has been put back by years. That's what the Defense Minister Benny Gantz says in terms of these strikes on the tunnels, on missile production, on senior commanders too. In turn, Hamas is denying that, saying that there are men proudly striding through the tunnels as we speak. So that is the situation in terms of the victory claims. There is a political criticism of the government of Benjamin Netanyahu from the right. One right-wing political leader saying, with the advanced military and intelligence at his disposal, the only thing that Netanyahu has managed to gain is a ceasefire without conditions. So criticism coming in on that front too.
And the core issues, we're a long way away from anyone addressing those.
Indeed. I mean, we've seen this kind of cyclical nature of these escalations. The smaller ones, maybe every few months, these very big conflicts, maybe every few years. But yes, I mean, putting aside the claims of victory on either side, it does look like things have merely pretty much gone back to where they were before all this. The things that have changed, I suppose, is for Hamas. It is a way to say, look, we have the people on our side. There are these huge celebrations, not just in Gaza, but also in the occupied West Bank, in occupied East Jerusalem, and in some areas of Palestinian Israeli concentration within Israel as well. And so in its political competition with Fatah, which dominates the Palestinian Authority of President Mahmoud Abbas, you can see after the cancellation of the elections by Abbas just a few weeks ago, that this can be seen as some kind of victory on sort of bald political calculations. But those calculations have to be set aside what the cost is. Similarly, with Israel saying that it has managed to set Hamas back, we're talking about many people dead, many families grieving, and a huge economic civilian cost to what's taken place.
Harry, for the moment, thank you very much. Harry Fawcett there for us in West Jerusalem. Well, the US President Joe Biden welcomed the ceasefire, saying his administration worked tirelessly behind the scenes. Gabriel Elizondo has more now from Washington.
President Joe Biden had come under increased pressure over the last week to do more to try to stop the violence, particularly with progressives within the Democratic Party who were calling on Biden to pressure Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to pursue more aggressively a ceasefire. So ultimately, when Biden did announce this ceasefire, he wanted to show that the U.S. was very much involved in it and wanted to take some credit.
We've held intensive high-level discussions, hour by hour, literally. Egypt, the Palestinian Authority, and other Middle Eastern countries, with the aim of avoiding the sort of prolonged conflict we've seen in previous years when the hostilities have broken out. I believe the Palestinians and Israelis equally deserve to live safely and securely and to enjoy equal measures of freedom, prosperity, and democracy. My administration will continue our quiet and relentless diplomacy toward that end. I believe we have a genuine opportunity to make progress, and I'm committed to working for it.
The question now becomes will the Biden administration use this opportunity to pursue peace with Israel and Palestine in the region? We are getting late word now that Secretary of State Antony Blinken will be heading to the region in the coming days to meet with both the Israelis and Palestinians and regional players to pursue some sort of peace agreement. Where these meetings will take place and with exactly whom is still unknown, but it does give an indication that at least in some degree, Biden does want to seize this opportunity to pursue a more lasting peace in the region.
Well, Omar Badar is a political analyst and member of the National Policy Council at the Arab American Institute. He says Washington has been complicit in prolonging the conflict.
Washington holds the primary responsibility here because it is the only country that holds significant leverage over Israel and is able to influence its behavior. But also, it's not just a matter of allowing Israel to behave however it wants or not, but the United States is specifically funding the Israeli military with billions of dollars every single year. No other country gets more money in military funding than Israel does. And then the United States runs interference at the United Nations by using its veto more than 40 times to block resolutions that would hold Israel accountable at the United Nations. So in effect, the United States is complicit. It is responsible for the fact that nobody can hold Israel accountable for its behavior. And that has to change. And we are seeing that it is beginning to change with that energy in the Democratic Party now, with the discourse shifting substantially within the United States, more celebrities speaking out in defense of Palestinian rights, and members of Congress now from President Biden's own party demanding that he hold Israel accountable and have a different kind of politics. Things are changing. People are becoming much more aware. There is much more energy within Congress itself at this point, where people are not afraid to speak up in defense of Palestinian rights and are not afraid to challenge the Israel lobby's influence in Washington and are demanding that the Biden administration make good on its claim that it's putting human rights first. If the Biden is going to claim that human rights come first in American foreign policy, then you cannot continue supporting Israel's oppression and crimes against Palestinians.
Well, the UN Secretary General has urged both sides to respect the truce and renew dialogue to bring about reconciliation and an end to division.
I welcome the ceasefire between Gaza and Israel after 11 days of deadly hostilities. I extend my deepest condolences to the victims of the violence and their loved ones. I commend Egypt and Qatar for the efforts carried out in close coordination with the UN to help restore calm to Gaza and Israel. I stressed that Israeli and Palestinian leaders have a responsibility beyond the restoration of calm to start a serious dialogue to address the root causes of the conflict.